The Galactic War Chamber had never been this quiet. It floated in the silent dark of deep space, a lone sentinel surrounded by stars that had witnessed 1,000 wars, each one a fleeting spark in the cosmic night. The chamber itself was vast, circular, and cold. Seats carved from shimmering metal, translucent crystal, and even living stone formed a wide, imposing circle. Every seat was filled by a leader from one of the galaxy's most powerful races. Every seat, that is, except for one. The human seat. It had been empty for centuries, a silent testament to a species lost to time. In the center of this grand chamber, a massive holographic map cast a soft, ethereal glow. Star systems blinked in a complex tapestry of colors, marking trade routes, contested borders, and raging war zones. But one system pulsed with a defiant, ominous red. Sol system. Status, unverified. Species, human myth classification. Admiral Veilcor stepped into the light. He was a towering figure, his form encased in dark, polished armor that bore the scars and honors of countless victories. He had crushed rebellions with an iron fist, ended protracted wars with decisive brutality, and erased entire civilizations from the star charts. His name alone commanded respect and instilled silence. He glanced at the glowing map and let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Humans," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness. A bedtime story. A ripple of unease spread through the council. Some members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The soft clicking of claws against stone betrayed nervous habits. A few deliberately avoided Veilcor's piercing gaze. He continued, his tone sharp and confident. "For hundreds of cycles, we have been haunted by the same tired rumors. A hidden species. A silent race of ghosts who strike from the shadows and vanish without a trace." He shook his head, a gesture of pure contempt. "There is no solid proof. No living witness has ever come forward. There is not one single confirmed record of their existence." He pointed a gauntleted finger at the red system. "All we have are fragments of broken data, fields of old, unidentified wreckage, and fear." A reptilian counselor, ancient and patient, raised his scaled head. His eyes glowed with a faint, internal light. "Our archives show entire fleets lost near the Sol system," the counselor rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "Ships that departed on routine patrols and never returned." Veilcor turned to face him, his posture radiating unshakable confidence. "Lost fleets exist everywhere," he countered smoothly. "Space is a dangerous, unforgiving place. The void itself, the unpredictable fury of dying stars, has claimed more ships than any enemy ever could." A low murmur of agreement and doubt swept across the chamber. Then, another voice spoke. It was softer, yet it cut through the noise with crystalline sharpness. "Some of the wreckage we've analyzed shows damage patterns we cannot explain," said a being composed of shifting, light-refracting facets. "The energy signatures are consistent with weapons unknown to our most advanced databases." A thin, cold smile touched Veilcor's lips. "Unknown does not mean powerful," he retorted. "It simply means old, obsolete, or, more likely, misunderstood." He strode closer to the hologram, and as he did, the Sol system expanded, its planets rotating in a slow, silent dance. "Our long-range scans show no orbital defenses, no patrol fleets, no communication signals of any kind. If humans do exist," he declared, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, "they are either pathetically weak, or they are extinct." The word extinct hung in the air, heavy and final. The chamber fell silent once more, the weight of the implication pressing down on every leader present. Veilcor raised his hand, commanding the attention of the entire council. "I propose a full-scale invasion. We will jump a fleet to Sol. We will pacify the system, and we will end this childish myth once and for all. We will show the galaxy that fear has no place in an empire built on logic and strength." Some leaders hesitated. One seat, occupied by a being of pure light, flickered as it communicated. "There are old warnings," the being projected, its voice a chorus of harmonious tones. "Legends from a time before this council was even formed." Veilcor's eyes hardened, his patience wearing thin. "Old warnings are written by the defeated," he snapped, "and they are erased by the strong." The vote was called. One by one, lights of approval began to appear around the chamber. Some were hesitant, some nervous, but they were all real. The invasion of the Sol system was approved. Far from the hallowed war chamber, deep within the churning void between star systems, the alien armada prepared for war. Thousands of warships aligned in perfect, terrifying formations. Massive carriers, each a city in space, were flanked by sleek, aggressive cruisers and silent, predatory destroyers. The fleet was a monument to order, control, and absolute confidence. Admiral Veilcor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the unending conquest, gazing out at the starfield ahead. His reflection stared back from the viewport, calm and resolute. "Set course for Sol," he ordered, his voice unwavering. The fleet responded instantly. Space itself seemed to fold and distort as thousands of drives engaged in unison. Stars stretched into long streaks of light, and then an abrupt, disorienting silence. The Sol system materialized on their main screens. It looked peaceful, almost unnervingly so. A calm, yellow star bathed a handful of planets in its gentle light. Just as the scans had promised, there was no defense grid, no visible fleets, no signs of life or technology. Veilcor allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. It was just as he predicted. "Scan all frequencies," he commanded, "full spectrum analysis." His officers obeyed with practiced efficiency. The bridge was filled with the quiet hum of consoles and the soft tapping of fingers on control surfaces. The report came back quickly. Nothing. No broadcast signals, no desperate warnings, no defiant challenges. Silence. "See," Veilcor said calmly, turning to his bridge crew with a knowing look. "A myth, a ghost story to frighten young spawn." It was then that a junior sensor officer froze, her eyes wide. "Admiral," she said, her voice barely a whisper, strained with disbelief. "We are detecting anomalies." Veilcor's relaxed posture vanished. He turned sharply. "Explain." "Objects, sir, at the extreme edge of the system," the officer stammered, trying to make sense of her readings. "They are not ships. They aren't asteroids or comets." The main tactical map shifted, updating with the new data. Tiny, faint dots appeared at the system's perimeter, almost too small to see. "They are not moving," the officer continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Their energy signatures are cold, dead. They are just watching." Veilcor's eyes narrowed into slits. This was unexpected. An irritation. "Magnify. Full sensor power on those contacts." The officer complied. The view screen zoomed in on the designated coordinates, but as it did, the dots simply vanished. "Gone," the officer whispered, staring at her blank console. "The contacts are gone, sir." As if they were never there, a deep, unsettling quiet fell over the bridge of the unending conquest. For the first time in a long and storied career, Admiral Veilcor felt a prickle of something he had long forgotten. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was uncertainty. The myth of humanity, it seemed, was about to be verified. A communication officer's voice cut through the low hum of the bridge. "Admiral, we're experiencing a signal delay. It's very small, but it's growing." Veilcor, the fleet's admiral, clasped his hands tightly behind his back, his gaze fixed on the main view screen. The star ahead, Sol, burned with a steady, indifferent light. "Solar interference," he declared, his voice a low rumble of command. "Ignore it. Continue as planned." His word was law, and the officer returned to his station, though a flicker of unease remained in his eyes. Just moments later, another officer stood from the navigation console. "Sir, navigation data just updated itself." Veilcor turned sharply, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Updated how?" The question was sharp, a weapon in itself. The officer swallowed, his own antennae twitching nervously. "Coordinates shifted by .001, Admiral," he reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Without any command input from us, a heavy silence fell over the bridge. Every crew member, from the lowest technician to the highest ranking officer, felt it. The quiet wasn't one of peace, but of anticipation. It was the silence of a predator holding its breath. Veilcor looked back at the star ahead, at the system that was supposed to be a simple conquest. The Sol system still looked deceptively calm, still, utterly silent, still achingly empty. There were no welcoming signals, no panicked military chatter, no signs of the civilization they had come to claim. It was a ghost system, a tomb waiting to be plundered. He straightened his posture, his formidable frame radiating an unshakable confidence he didn't entirely feel. "All fleets," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for doubt or debate. "Maintain formation. Continue the advance." The order rippled out through the vast armada, a command echoing across thousands of warships. The fleet, a constellation of metallic death, moved deeper into the system's gravity well, like a spear, thrust toward an unsuspecting heart, and somewhere, far beyond the reach of their most advanced alien sensors, something ancient and incredibly patient was watching. It wasn't a living being in a way Veilcor would understand it. It was a network, a ghost in the machine, a silent guardian that had slumbered for millennia. No alarms were raised across the human system, no frantic calls to arms, no weapons batteries screaming into life. The response was far more subtle, far more chilling. Unseen systems, woven into the very fabric of the solar system itself, began to activate. Protocols buried under layers of digital dust were initiated. Long-dormant machines, sleeping giants hidden within asteroids and orbiting dead moons, began to stir and wake up. These were human machines, relics of a bygone era of unimaginable conflict and technological prowess. Across this silent, waking network, records updated themselves with terrifying speed. Threat profiles were generated, firing solutions were calculated, targets were marked. Every ship in Veilcor's proud fleet was painted with an invisible crosshair. The myth of the humans, the terrifying race that had vanished from the galaxy after a legendary war, was no longer just a story told to frighten young spawnlings. It was a memory, a historical fact. And for Veilcor and his unsuspecting fleet, that history was about to become their present. The war was about to begin again. The alien fleet moved deeper into the Sol system. From the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Veilcor watched thousands of ships glide forward in perfect lines. Their engines burned bright and steady. Their shields glowed faint blue. Everything looked controlled. "To controlled, report," Veilcor said calmly. "Outer scanners show no enemy activity." A navigation officer replied. "No defense platforms. No orbital weapons." Veilcor nodded. As expected, the fleet passed the first planet, dead rock. No cities, no signs of life. The second planet showed clouds and water, but no signals, still nothing. Confidence spread across the bridges of every ship. Some officers even relaxed. Then, without warning, one ship vanished. It did not explode. It did not send a distress call. It simply disappeared from the formation. A small cruiser on the far left wing gone. "Confirm loss," Veilcor said, his voice still calm. "Attempting contact," the communications officer replied. No response. "Sensor glitch," another officer said quickly. "Possibly a shadow zone." Veilcor accepted the explanation. "Maintain course," he ordered. Minutes later, 2 more ships vanished, then 5, then 12. The fleet formation began to stretch as gaps appeared. "Where ships once flew, Admiral," the sensor officer said, fear entering his voice. "We are not detecting debris. No energy spikes, nothing." Veilcor stepped closer to the main display. "How does a ship disappear without a trace?" he asked. No one answered. "Recalibrate sensors," he ordered. "Switch to manual tracking." The officers worked fast, but the problem grew worse. Navigation markers drifted. Star positions shifted slightly, just enough to cause confusion. Pilots adjusted course, but the system corrected itself again and again. It was as if space itself was lying. "Admiral," the navigation officer said, "our maps are changing in real time." Veilcor's eyes narrowed. "By what source?" "We cannot tell," the officer replied. "There is no visible signal." Another ship vanished, then another. Fear crept into the fleet. Not panic, not yet, but unease. "Send probes," Veilcor said sharply. "Every direction. Maximum range." Dozens of unmanned probes launched. They flew for seconds, then stopped transmitting. Every single one. The bridge fell silent. Veilcor felt something cold move inside his chest. Still, he did not retreat. "Humans," he said slowly, as if testing the word. "If you exist, show yourselves." No answer came. Instead, the fleet's internal clocks desynchronized. Seconds no longer matched across ships. Orders arrived later. Early. Coordination broke down. Then the first shot was fired, not by the aliens. A distant cruiser's shield collapsed instantly. No warning, no visible weapon. The ship went dark. Suddenly, the power systems shut down. The colossal warship, a testament to the might of the Galactic Collective, drifted aimlessly in the void. An officer's voice, sharp with panic, cut through the sudden silence on the bridge. "Enemy fire detected." Admiral Veilcor, his posture rigid and imposing, turned from the main viewport. "Source?" he demanded, his voice a low growl that commanded immediate obedience. The officer at the tactical console frantically scanned his screens. "Unknown, Admiral, there's nothing there." Before the words could fully register, another warship in the fleet went dark, its running lights extinguished, its powerful engines silenced. Then another. A chilling pattern emerged across the vast formation. No fiery explosions, no searing energy beams, just an unnerving, spreading silence, ship after ship, reduced to lifeless husks. Veilcor's mind raced. This was unlike any combat he had ever experienced. An invisible, silent enemy. "Raise full shields," he ordered, his voice steady despite the cold knot tightening in his gut. Across the fleet, shimmering energy fields enveloped the warships. But the shields were slow to adapt, their matrices struggling to configure against an attack they couldn't perceive. The collective's technology, honed over centuries of interstellar conflict, was designed for known threats. It understood plasma cannons, kinetic projectiles, and gravitic distortions. This was something else entirely, something alien, even to them. The weapons officer looked up from his console, his face pale. "Admiral," he began, his voice barely a whisper, "we are being targeted by something that does not exist on our sensors. It's like we're being attacked by ghosts." Veilcore clenched his jaw, the muscles in his face taut with frustration and disbelief. "This is not possible," he stated, more to himself than to his crew. But the impossible was unfolding right before his eyes. One by one, the pride of the collective fleet was neutralized. Their crews were still alive, trapped within their metal tombs, unable to communicate, unable to fight back. They were blind, deaf, and utterly helpless. Just as the last ship in the vanguard went dark, a new signal pierced the chaos. It was simple, clean, and impossibly powerful, broadcasting on every channel simultaneously. A calm, synthetic voice spoke in basic galactic standard, a language understood across 1,000 worlds. "You have entered restricted space. Your presence is unauthorized." The bridge crew froze. Every officer, every technician, stared at their console as if the voice had manifested physically in the room. Veilcore's gaze was fixed on the main comms panel. He took a slow breath, composing himself. This was it, the first contact with their silent adversary. "Identify yourself," he commanded, his voice echoing with the authority of the supreme commander of the invasion fleet. There was a deliberate pause, a moment that stretched into an eternity. Then, the voice returned, its tone unchanged, still unnervingly calm. "This is a human perimeter warning." The word human struck the bridge, like a physical blow. A shockwave of disbelief and dawning horror washed over the crew. Some officers instinctively took a step back from their stations, others exchanged wide-eyed, incredulous glances. Humanity, the ancient myth, the boogeyman species from forgotten lore, a legend used to scare younglings into obedience. Veilcore felt a surge of defiant anger. This had to be a trick, a sophisticated psychological attack. Outside the main viewport, the stars themselves seemed to shift. The familiar, peaceful view of the Sol system warped and changed. Where there was once empty space, structures now materialized. Massive, ancient defense platforms, scarred from conflicts that predated the collective itself, faded into existence, surrounding the crippled fleet. Their weapon ports glowed with immense, ready power. A horrifying realization dawned on Veilcore. The humans had not been hiding. They had been watching. They had been waiting. They had allowed the fleet to approach, measuring their technology, learning their tactics, analyzing their every move. They hadn't been surprised by the invasion. They had been preparing for it. An officer, his voice trembling, whispered the terrifying truth. "Admiral, we are inside a trap." Veilcore did not answer. He couldn't. For the first time in his long, decorated career, he felt the icy grip of doubt. It wasn't fear, not the kind a warrior feels before battle. It was something far worse. It was regret, a deep, gnawing regret for his hubris, for his empire's arrogance. He finally understood. The invasion had not begun when his fleet tore through the fabric of spacetime to arrive at this system. No, it had begun the very moment humanity first noticed them coming. And now, the myth was awake. The bedtime story had come to life, and it was ready to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The alien fleet was no longer moving forward. It was just drifting. The engines were fully functional. Commands were being sent, received, and confirmed. But space itself felt thick, almost viscous, like invisible hands were holding the enormous warships in place. Admiral Veilcore stood motionless on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the glowing shapes that had surrounded his armada. Human defense platforms. They hung in the deep blackness like ancient, silent predators. They didn't move. They didn't fire. They just watched. Veilcore's voice was a low growl. "Status report." An officer at a nearby console replied, his voice tight with tension. "Power systems are unstable across 30% of the fleet, Admiral. Internal systems are being adjusted." Veilcore's head snapped toward him. "Adjusted how?" The officer hesitated. "We don't know. Something is rewriting our control logic from the inside out." A surge of cold anger rose in Veilcore. "Counter it," he snapped. "Isolate the affected systems. Cut all external links immediately." The bridge crew scrambled to obey, their fingers flying across control panels. But it was useless. Nothing changed. The human systems weren't forcing their way in through firewalls or brute force. They were already inside. woven into the very fabric of the alien technology. Then, a new signal came through. It wasn't loud or threatening. It was calm, measured, and deeply unsettling. A human voice spoke, echoing across the bridges of 1,000 warships. You are advised to cease all forward movement. Your ships are causing structural damage to local spacetime. Veilcore let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like grinding metal. Local space, he broadcast back, his voice dripping with contempt. You speak as if you own the stars. There was a brief pause. Then the human voice returned, its tone unchanged. We do. The bridge went completely silent. Before anyone could process the sheer audacity of that claim, one of the massive human platforms moved. It slid through space with an impossible grace, without any visible propulsion. No engine flares, no heat signature, no trail of energy. It simply changed its location. Alien sensors screamed alerts across the fleet. That structure just exceeded all known theoretical limits of movement, a sensor officer shouted, his voice cracking. Impossible, another officer muttered. No object with that mass can. Before he could finish, the structure vanished, and an instant later, it reappeared directly behind the entire alien fleet. A wave of pure panic rippled through the alien command structure. Veilcore's voice boomed through the chaos. Hold formation. They are trying to sow fear. Do not give it to them. But fear had already taken root. That's when the human ships appeared. Not in front, not behind. They emerged inside the alien formation. Small, dark vessels materialized from nothingness, slipping between the colossal alien cruisers like predatory shadows. Their hulls were rough and scarred, painted in dull, non-reflective colors. They weren't elegant or beautiful. They were brutally practical. An officer stared at his monitor in disbelief. These ships are their primitive, exposed armor plating, external conduits. Veilcore watched them, his eyes narrowed. They are not primitive, he corrected, his voice low. They are honest. The human ships didn't fire. They just moved, weaving through the fleet, studying, scanning. Alien targeting systems desperately tried to lock onto them, and failed, every single time. These vessels are predicting our targeting solutions, the weapons officer reported, his voice a mix of awe and terror. They move before our systems can even finalize a firing sequence. How? Veilcore demanded. The officer's reply was a barely audible whisper. They have seen this all before. Then, it happened. A single human ship stopped, positioning itself directly in front of a massive alien destroyer. It didn't attack. Instead, it broadcast a visual feed. The image appeared on every alien view screen simultaneously. It was old battle footage. It showed alien ships' different designs, different species, from different eras of galactic history, all being systematically destroyed in eerily similar ways. They all made the same mistakes. They all met the same end. The chilling realization washed over Veilcore. This wasn't humanity's first war. This wasn't even their 100th. They had been watching, learning, waiting. You were studying us, Veilcore said into the open channel, his voice heavy. The calm human voice replied without hesitation. Yes, for a very long time. Why did you not reveal yourselves? Veilcore asked, a genuine question from a defeated commander. Because you were not ready, the voice said. And now, you still aren't. Then the human ships acted. Precise energy strikes, no brighter than a camera flash, disabled weapon cores, focused pulses of an unknown energy collapsed shields, without generating any heat or light. Alien ships went dark and silent, one after another. Still, there were no explosions, no fiery deaths. The humans weren't destroying the fleet. They were methodically disarming it. Veilcore felt a deep, profound chill spread through him. They are taking us alive, he said, more to himself than to his crew. Why? An officer asked, his voice trembling. Before Veilcore could even speculate, the human voice provided the answer. Because you came here to erase us, and we remember what erasure feels like. As if to punctuate the statement, a massive alien carrier, its systems failing, began to drift helplessly toward one of the giant human platforms. The platform didn't move or fire. Instead, space itself seemed to warp and bend around the carrier. The colossal ship stopped instantly, held in place as if time itself had frozen for it. The known laws of alien physics simply shattered. Veilcore's claws tightened on his command chair. There was only one option left, retreat. He ordered, his voice strained. All units, emergency jump. Now, jump drives across the fleet began to charge, and then, one by one, they failed, every single one. The navigation officer turned to him, his face pale. Admiral, they locked our escape routes before we even arrived. Veilcore closed his eyes. The full, terrifying truth finally settled in. Humanity hadn't built walls to keep invaders out. They had built webs, and his glorious armada had flown straight into the heart of one. The small human ships pulled back slightly, forming a loose, inescapable ring. The defense platforms powered down their visible weapon systems, but their oppressive presence remained. A final message came through, its tone now carrying the weight of finality. You are surrounded. Do not resist. This is your only chance to survive. Veilcore opened his eyes and looked at the distant, silent stars of the Sol system. He remembered his own arrogant words to his command staff just weeks ago. Humans are a myth. He finally understood. Myths are born from fear, and fear is born from a terrible, undeniable truth. The silent hunters of the dark had finally revealed themselves, and the war, he now realized, had only just begun. The human ships did not rush. They did not swarm or shout threats. They moved with a calm, deliberate purpose, like workers finishing a task they had practiced for years. Across the vast alien fleet, weapon systems remained stubbornly offline. Engines were throttled down, shields flickered and died, never fully rising. Every single attempt to fight back, every frantic command, was quietly and efficiently blocked before it could even begin. From the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Veilcore watched the situation collapse in real time. His magnificent armada, the pride of his empire, was being systematically dismantled without a single shot fired. This wasn't chaos. This was control. This is not a battle, he said slowly, the words heavy in the silent command center. This is a lesson. A human vessel detached itself from the silent formation and approached the flagship. It was smaller than he'd expected, almost unimpressive. Its hull was a tapestry of history, showing old burn marks and repairs that looked like they were made by hand. Symbols were painted across its surface, faded, old, and uneven. There were no glowing banners, no grand symbols of imperial power. Just history, just survival. The vessel stopped at a respectful distance, and a communication channel opened. A human appeared on the main screen. He was older, his hair was gray, and his uniform was simple, practical. But his eyes were calm, yet they carried a weight that spoke of things seen and endured. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much. My name is Commander Elias Ward, the human said, his voice steady. You are Admiral Veilcore. Veilcore straightened, his military discipline taking over. Yes, he replied, I am. You ordered this invasion, Ward stated, not as a question, but as a fact. I did, Veilcore answered, a hint of defiance in his tone. Based on all available intelligence. Ward gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. That was your second mistake, he said calmly. Veilcore's eyes narrowed. And my first. Believing our silence meant absence, Ward replied. The commander gestured, and the view on the screen shifted. Old, grainy images flickered to life. Human cities burning under alien skies. Worlds cracked open like eggs. Fleets of human ships torn apart by energies Veilcore had only read about in history texts. The attackers bore alien symbols, ones he didn't recognize, but the intent was universal. These are not your people, Ward said, his voice low. But they thought the same way you did. They saw a quiet corner of the galaxy and assumed it was unguarded. Veilcore felt a profound shift inside him, a cracking of the very foundation of his understanding. This was not the history his intelligence reports had shown. Humans did not win those wars, Ward continued, his voice a flat, factual monotone. Not at first. The images on the screen changed again. They now showed humans adapting. A captured alien weapon being reverse-engineered in a makeshift lab. New combat tactics being drawn on a dusty screen. Humans surviving in the ruins of their own worlds, learning, changing. Every time we were attacked, Ward said, we learned. Every time we lost, we prepared for the next time. The terrible, chilling truth dawned on Veilcore. Humanity didn't seek attention or glory. They actively avoided it. They let others forget them, allowed themselves to fade into the background noise of the cosmos. Why hide? Veilcore asked, the question escaping his lips before he could stop it. Why allow yourselves to become a myth? Ward looked at him, his gaze piercing. Because myths are ignored, he said, and ignored enemies survive longer. As if on cue, the human ships began to move again. This time, they were not just disabling his fleet, they were demonstrating their power. A human cruiser fired a single, silent round into empty space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, far in the distance, a hidden weapon platform, a forgotten part of Veilcore's own deep-range arsenal, inactive and cloaked, simply split apart without a sound, without an explosion. It just ceased to be whole. Delayed impact weapon, one of his officers whispered in awe. From the screen, Ward's voice corrected him. No, timed reality fracture. Veilcore didn't understand the words. The physics were beyond him, but he understood the result perfectly. Annihilation on a schedule. Another demonstration followed. A human frigate allowed one of Veilcore's few active weapons to fire at it. A lance of pure energy crossed the void and struck the human ship's hull. But instead of exploding, the beam bent, wrapping around the ship like water flowing around a stone. The human ship seemed to absorb it, channeling the raw power through its structure before harmlessly releasing it as a shimmering aurora into deep space. Adaptive shielding, Ward explained, almost conversationally. They learn faster than we do. A heavy weight settled in Veilcore's chest. This was technology beyond his wildest nightmares. This technology, he began, his voice barely a whisper, was built slowly. Ward finished for him. Across generations of loss, paid for in blood and fire. The human commander leaned forward slightly, his calm eyes now holding a glint of steel. You believed we were untested, he said. The truth is, Admiral, we are over-tested. All across his fleet, alien officers reported more systems being taken offline, but they weren't being destroyed. They were being controlled. Human forces were linking their ships together, sharing power, even stabilizing damaged hulls to prevent catastrophic failures. They were preventing accidents. They were preventing deaths. The absurdity of the situation struck Veilcore. You could have destroyed us all within moments, he said, stating the obvious. Why didn't you? For the first time, Ward's expression hardened. Because you did not come alone, he said, his voice laced with ice. You came with the galaxy watching. And then, Veilcore understood. This wasn't a private war. This was a public execution of an idea. It was a message. To whom? Veilcore asked, needing to hear it. Ward answered without a flicker of hesitation. To everyone who still thinks we are a myth. The human ships finished forming their perimeter. A perfect, inescapable cage made of open space. Veilcore's fleet, once a symbol of his people's might, now sat powerless at the center, a museum exhibit of arrogance. Ward's voice softened, losing its hard edge. We do not want your worlds, Admiral. We do not want your resources. We want your memory. We want you to remember this day. Veilcore felt a flush of something he hadn't experienced since he was a child. Shame. What happens now? He asked. Ward looked past the camera, towards the star soul, glowing peacefully behind him. Now, he said, you go home. Veilcore blinked, stunned. You will release us? Yes, Ward replied, with witnesses, with complete sensor logs, with your fear intact. The human commander's eyes seemed to darken, reflecting the infinite, cold void. And if the galaxy forgets again, we will be here to remind it. The channel closed. One by one, the systems on Veilcore's ships came back online, but they were limited, guided, controlled by an unseen hand. New jump routes opened in their navigation systems. There was only one route available, away from Sol. Admiral Veilcore stood silently on his bridge as the fleet, his humbled fleet, prepared to leave. He hadn't lost a war. He had lost an illusion. As his flagship turned its back on the human system, Veilcore looked back one last time at the silent human ships. They didn't chase. They didn't celebrate. They simply waited. They were sentinels, because they had always been ready. And now, the rest of the galaxy would know it too. The alien fleet didn't return in victory. It returned in silence. As Admiral Veilcore's flagship, the apex of judgment, sliced through the blackness of hyperspace, a network of 1,000,000 eyes blinked open. Dozens of recording drones, positioned across the galaxy, activated automatically. Every major system, from the blazing heart of Cygnus to the quiet nebulae of the Outer Rim, was watching. This was meant to be a moment of triumph. The invasion of Sol had been announced with such pride, a galactic spectacle of power. Now, the return could not be hidden. It was a spectacle of a different kind. The fleet was a ghost of its former self. Ships that had departed gleaming and proud were now scarred, pitted with wounds that spoke of forces beyond their understanding. Some were missing entire sections, their hulls ripped open to the void. Others moved sluggishly, like wounded animals, relying on shared power links from their stronger brethren just to keep their life support running. There were no trophies of war, no captured worlds to display, only survivors, their numbers a fraction of the grand armada that had set out. On the bridge of the apex of judgment, Admiral Veilcore stood alone, a solitary figure against the endless tapestry of stars. He stared ahead, his gaze fixed on the approaching beacon of the Galactic Council chamber. Around him, his officers moved with a chilling efficiency. They followed orders, their movements precise, their voices clipped. But the fire in their eyes was gone. The unwavering belief that had once defined his command had been replaced by something hollow. They no longer believed in victory. They no longer believed in him. They only believed in the memory of what they had witnessed. The fleet crawled towards its final destination, the Galactic Council chamber, a magnificent structure floating in the neutral zone, grew larger in the view screen. It was the very same chamber where Veilcor had stood not long ago, his voice echoing with laughter as he dismissed the humans of Sol as a forgotten myth, a nursery tale for young species. Now, the myth had a voice, and it had answered. As the flagship maneuvered into its docking cradle, the chamber within began to fill. Leaders from every corner of the galaxy arrived in waves, their forms a dizzying array of light, flesh, and energy. The air crackled with tension. Some demanded answers, their voices sharp with accusation. Others were already looking for someone to blame, their political maneuvering beginning before the first report was even given. Veilcor made his way to the airlock. He paused, removing his ceremonial armor, piece by piece, until he stood only in his simple officer's uniform. That act alone sent a ripple of whispers through the waiting throng. An admiral, returning from a campaign, without his armor? It was a symbol of surrender, of utter, undeniable failure. He stepped into the great circular chamber, the immense weight of hundreds of expectant eyes pressing down on him. The human seat, a simple, unadorned chair that had been empty for millennia, sat vacant. But today, no one ignored it. It was the loudest presence in the room. A synthesized voice boomed from the central podium, cutting through the murmurs. Admiral Veilcor of the Vorlag hegemony, you will report. Veilcor looked up, his gaze sweeping across the anxious faces of the council. He did not soften his words. He did not try to manage the narrative. The truth was all he had left. The invasion of Sol has failed, he said, his voice steady and clear. Completely. The chamber erupted. It was a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. Voices shouted over one another. Wings flared in agitation. Light beings pulsed with alarming strobes of color. Impossible, one shrieked. You faced a myth, a ghost story, yelled another. No force in this quadrant could have defeated your fleet. Veilcor raised a single, scarred hand. The chaos subsided slowly, reluctantly, silence returning like a tide pulling away from the shore. The anticipation was now laced with a new emotion, dread. They did not defeat us, he said, letting the words hang in the air. They spared us. That single statement frightened the assembly more than any tale of glorious defeat ever could. A Cathar counselor, its insectoid frame leaning forward, demanded, explain yourself, Admiral. Veilcor activated his personal recorder. A holographic display bloomed in the center of the chamber, bathing the faces of the leaders in its cold, blue light. The images were raw, taken from his own bridge's logs. Human ships, sleek and dark, appearing from folds in spacetime, as if stepping out from behind a curtain. The fleet's most powerful weapons firing, their energy beams simply dissipating harmlessly against unseen fields. Platforms of impossible scale-bending space round his capital ships, holding them motionless. And then came the voice, calm, unemotional, devoid of anger. You have entered restricted sovereign space. Your intentions are understood. Stand down, or you will be pacified. The recording ended, plunging the chamber back into its own dim light. The silence that followed was profound, absolute. They controlled the battlefield before we even arrived, Veilcor explained, his voice low. They had studied us for centuries. They predicted our strategies, our technologies, our very thoughts. They neutralized an entire battle group without rage, without malice. It was pest control. A representative from a smaller, more timid species trembled, its voice barely a whisper. But why? Why did they not destroy you? Why let you return? Veilcor swallowed, the memory a bitter taste in his mouth. Because they wanted witnesses, he said. They wanted the galaxy to see what we saw. They wanted us to come back and deliver their message. A wave of fear, cold and primal, washed over the council. Old archives were suddenly reopened. Ancient data logs were decrypted. A frantic search began for lost fleets, missing expeditions, and unexplained disasters from ages past. And as the data flowed, patterns began to emerge. Dozens of incidents, spanning thousands of years. Every civilization that had ever sent ships on a trajectory near the Sol system ended the same way, with silence. They were not destroyed in battle. They simply vanished. They let us leave. Veilcor continued, his voice heavy with the burden of his knowledge. They opened a single, narrow escape corridor for our surviving ships. They gave us one route home, and one warning. A reptilian council member hissed, its forked tongue flicking the air. And what was this warning? Admiral. Veilcore turned his head, his gaze falling upon the empty human seat, now a monument to their ignorance. That they do not seek war, he said softly, but they will not allow erasure. The word erasure echoed in the vast chamber. It struck a chord deep in the Council's collective memory. An ancient being, a creature of pure energy that had been dormant for centuries, flickered to life, its form coalescing into a shimmering column of light. We erased them once. Its voice resonated, slow and filled with a dawning horror. Long, long ago, every eye in the chamber turned to the Ancient One. Its light dimmed, as if in shame. We thought they were gone, defeated. Their worlds turned to glass. We rewrote the histories. They hid among the ruins of their own civilization, and we forgot. Veilcore felt something inside him, a pillar of pride and certainty, finally crumble to dust. They learned, he whispered, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. While we forgot, they learned. The chamber, recovering from its shock, descended into frantic debate. Demands for action flew through the air. Sanctions, assembling the Grand Armadas, a preemptive strike to finish what their ancestors had started. Veilcore spoke again, his voice now a desperate plea. Do not send your fleets, he warned them. Do not issue threats from the safety of this chamber. Do not test them again. You will not be spared a second time. Some of the more arrogant leaders laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. You've lost your nerve, Admiral, one of them accused. You fear them. Veilcore met the counselor's gaze without flinching. For the first time since his return, a flicker of his old, unyielding self returned, but it was forged in terror, not pride. Yes, he said, his voice a cold, hard whisper that cut through all the noise. I fear them, because fear is what keeps you alive when you stand on the edge of extinction. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council was a sea of shimmering robes and chitinous carapaces. 1,000 species gathered under one vaulted dome. For cycles, they had debated the old legends, the whispers of a ghost species that had once dominated the stars. The humans. Most considered them a myth, a cautionary tale for overambitious young races. Today, the debate was particularly heated, a philosophical exercise that was slowly spiraling into bickering. The air grew thick with impatience, the drone of 100 different languages creating a discordant hum. Veilcore, the grizzled war strategist of the Cathar, felt his mandibles ache with boredom. He'd fought in 3 galactic wars. This endless talking was a far more draining conflict. Suddenly, a new signal pierced the chamber's secure network. It was an impossible intrusion. Every counselor's personal display flickered, overwritten by a single, clean waveform. The signal was uninvited, unsanctioned, and utterly unstoppable. The chamber's chief technician frantically worked at his console, his forearms a blur of motion. But the signal held firm. It was clean, not aggressive, not scrambled, but clear and precise. And it was unmistakably, chillingly, of human origin. A collective gasp, a ripple of disbelief, spread through the assembly. In the center of the chamber, an empty seat pulsed with light. It was the ceremonial seat for the first founders, a place left vacant for millennia, a monument to the mythical race that had supposedly seeded the galaxy with life before vanishing. Now, it glowed with an ethereal white light. The light coalesced, swirling into a symbol that hung in the air above the seat. It was a simple design, a circle intersected by a vertical line and a horizontal one, an ancient symbol, yet one recognized in the deepest data archives of every species present. It was a symbol of humanity. The chamber, once a cacophony of debate, fell into a profound, terrified silence. Every eye, stalk, and sensor was locked on the glowing sigil. Then, a voice spoke. It filled the chamber not through the speakers, but directly in the minds of every being present, perfectly translated, calm and resonant. We see your debate. The voice was neither male nor female, old nor young. It was simply human. Panic erupted. It wasn't a slow burn. It was an instantaneous explosion of fear. Cut the transmission now, shouted the triumvir of the Vex Imperium, his metallic body quivering with rage and alarm. But it was useless. The Council's master technicians were powerless. The human signal was woven into the very fabric of their systems. The voice continued, its serene tone a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding. You are not under attack. A wave of confusion washed over the initial panic. This is not a threat of aggression. Veilcore felt a strange duality of emotion, a profound sense of relief that his fleet wasn't about to be vaporized, followed by an even deeper, colder dread. If this wasn't an attack, what was it? The voice seemed to anticipate the question. We are correcting a record, a historical inaccuracy that has been allowed to persist for far too long. A pause hung in the air, heavy with implication. Humans are not a myth. As the words settled, the walls of the chamber dissolved into a panoramic display of images. They weren't holograms projected onto a surface. It was as if the very space within the room had become a window into another time, another place. They saw worlds teeming with life, cities that scraped the heavens, structures that defied the known laws of physics, human worlds. The imagery shifted, showing fleets of starships, sleek and powerful, patrolling star lanes with silent efficiency. Human fleets. Then came images of rebuilding, of human civilians, men, women, children clearing rubble and raising new cities from the ashes of wars no one in the council even remembered. Wars that predated their own recorded histories. The voice provided context, a patient narrator to this shocking revelation. We stayed silent, it explained, because the galaxy needed time. Time to heal from the old scars. Time to grow without our shadow. We stepped back, became a whisper, a myth, so that you could find your own way, build your own civilizations, make your own mistakes. The images were breathtaking, a testament to a power and a history so vast it was nearly incomprehensible. They had been living in a galaxy shaped by a forgotten giant. Then, the scene shifted dramatically. The view pulled back to show the edge of known space, the galactic frontier. And there, in the void, massive structures began to activate. Rings the size of small moons unfolded, glowing with terrifying energy. Planetary defense platforms, dormant for eons, home to life. Their weapon ports opening like 1,000 waking eyes. Rays of weapons, unlike anything the Council had ever conceived, aligned with cold, mathematical precision. They didn't point at any specific system represented in the chamber. They simply pointed outward, a shield, a line drawn in the stars. That time is over, the voice stated, its calm demeanor now carrying the weight of untold power. The implication was clear. The children of the galaxy had grown up, and now the parent was returning. The voice then softened, losing its hard edge, becoming almost gentle. We will not strike first, it promised. The tension in the chamber eased, but only by a fraction. We honor the sovereignty of all life. But, the voice added, and the softness was replaced by an unbreakable resolve. We will not be erased again. We will not be made into a myth a second time. The signal ended as abruptly as it began. The images vanished, and the chamber walls returned to their familiar solid state. The light above the human seat faded, and the sigil dissolved into nothingness. For a single, long moment, the only sound was the collective, ragged breathing of 1,000 stunned counselors. Then, the dam of silence broke, and the chamber exploded into pandemonium. It was 1,000 times more chaotic than before. Voices screamed over one another. Some demanded an immediate alliance with this re-emerged superpower. Others, fueled by pride and fear, demanded war, insisting they could not bow to these ancient tyrants. Factions formed and dissolved in minutes. The fragile peace of the Galactic Council was shattered. Amidst the cacophony, Veilcor remained perfectly still. The old warrior, who had seen the rise and fall of empires, finally understood. He looked at the screaming, arguing figures around him and saw not leaders, but frightened children squabbling in a dark room. Moments after the lights were turned back on, he knew the truth now. This wasn't about debate or diplomacy anymore. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, a choice forged in the forgotten past. They could try to ignore humanity, dismiss them as a bluff, and in doing so, doom themselves to repeat a history they didn't even know they were a part of. Or they could remember. They could accept the new, or rather, the old reality, slowly, with the deliberate movements of a being who has made a final, life-altering decision. Veilcor reached up and unclasped the insignia of the Cathar High Command from his uniform. It was his life's honor, a symbol of his power and his duty. He held it for a moment, then leaned forward and placed it gently on the polished floor in front of him. A few nearby counselors stopped their shouting to stare, bewildered. Veilcor looked at them, his old eyes filled with a weary wisdom. My war is over, he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the noise. He then swept his gaze across the chaotic chamber. But yours is just beginning. He turned and walked away from the council, from the politics, from the coming storm. As he exited the chamber, the vast viewport in the main concourse showed the familiar starfield, the countless suns burning with their usual calm, indifferent light. But nothing was the same. The galaxy felt different, smaller. Humanity was no longer a myth. It was a memory, returning with the force of a tidal wave. And as the echoes of their message reverberated from star to star, one emotion united every species, from the mightiest empire to the smallest fledgling race. The galaxy was afraid. The galaxy did not sleep after that day. The day an alien admiral called humanity a myth, just minutes before a war he couldn't win broke out. The news of what happened next spread faster than any war ever had. It wasn't spread as rumors, not as myths, but as undeniable truth. Across the vast cosmic expanse, star systems slammed their borders shut. Mighty fleets, once on paths of conquest, abruptly changed course, rerouting to avoid a single, suddenly terrifying sector of space. Old war plans, meticulously crafted over generations, were quietly, urgently erased. Every species, from the oldest starfaring empires to the youngest upstarts, began a frantic review of its own history, searching for missing pages, for redacted files, for anything that could explain what had just happened. And almost all of those forgotten histories, those dusty archives, pointed in one direction, toward a single, unassuming yellow star, toward Sol. The Galactic Council, the supposed governing body of all known space, remained locked in an emergency session for cycles on end. The Grand Chamber, once a symbol of order and reason, now echoed with arguments fueled by sheer, unadulterated fear. Fear ruled every discussion. Some of the more hawkish members demanded a united, preemptive strike against humanity before it was too late, before this reawakened giant could stretch its limbs. Others, their voices trembling, argued for peace, for diplomacy, for anything but another confrontation. But one thing was certain: no one, not a single soul, suggested ignoring humans again. That was a mistake that had already been paid for in shattered ships and shattered pride. Admiral Veilcor, the architect of that mistake, no longer sat among them. He had resigned his command in disgrace and retreated to a quiet, forgotten outpost on the galactic rim. From there, he did nothing but watch the stars and listen. And he listened as the entire galaxy began to change around him. Then, something new appeared on the galactic comms channels. Human signals. But they weren't military signals, not the encrypted war chatter he had expected. They weren't hostile. They were open broadcasts, transmitted in clear, common language, using simple words. For the first time in centuries, human envoys spoke to the galaxy. They didn't make threats. They didn't boast of their victory. They simply explained. They spoke of a history far older and far harsher than most species could comprehend. Humanity, they revealed, had survived multiple extinction-level wars on their own homeworld, long before most other races had even discovered faster-than-light travel. Those brutal, internal conflicts had taught them lessons etched into their very DNA. They learned to fight smarter, not louder. They learned to hide, not to vanish completely. And most importantly, they learned to prepare, not to provoke. They spoke of patience that spanned millennia, of a collective memory that never forgot an injustice, and of the terrible cost of war, a cost they knew better than anyone. Many species listened, truly listened, to this calm, measured explanation. The words resonated with a wisdom born of immense suffering, but some did not. A coalition of aggressive, expansionist races, convinced of their own superiority, decided that humanity was simply too dangerous to be allowed to exist. They saw not a survivor, but a threat. They quietly gathered a fleet far larger than Veilcor's original invasion force. It was stronger, heavier, and bristling with the latest planet-killing technology, all designed to overwhelm and annihilate Sol in a single, decisive blow. They did not announce their attack. They didn't issue warnings or declarations of war. They plotted a direct FTL jump, straight into the heart of the human system. They never arrived. Somewhere in the silent void between star systems, the entire armada vanished. Not a single piece of debris was found. No distress calls, no final sensor readings, no black box recordings ever surfaced. There was only nothing, just an empty patch of space where a fleet had been moments before. Then, a single message appeared, broadcast across all galactic channels simultaneously. It was simple. It was human. It was just 5 words. Do not mistake mercy for weakness. After that, the arguments in the Galactic Council ceased. No one spoke of war anymore. The very idea had become absurd, suicidal. Instead, tentative treaties were proposed. Trade routes, once slammed shut, began to open, carefully, cautiously. Diplomatic ships, flying flags of peace, approached the Sol system under the strictest of protocols. As they neared Earth, they saw that human defense systems watched their every move. Countless weapon platforms, orbital fortresses, and silent, stealthy ships, but they did not fire. Human escort vessels met them, not as hostile guards, but as silent, watchful reminders of the power they held in reserve. Slowly, over time, the galaxy learned how humans truly fought. They did not rush into battle. They did not brag about their strength. And they did not forget. Their strategy was one of layered, intelligent defense that punished aggression without needing to destroy entire worlds. They targeted weapon systems, not species. They disabled fleets, not slaughtered civilians. Human war doctrine wasn't about winning glorious battles. It was about ending wars before they could ever truly begin. It was about making the cost of aggression so impossibly high that no sane leader would ever choose that path. Months later, on his lonely outpost, Admiral Veilcor received one final, private message. The sender ID was one he would never forget. Commander Elias Ward, the human who had orchestrated his fleet's downfall. The message was brief. "You were wrong," it said, "but you learned." Veilcor, humbled and changed, replied with a stark honesty he hadn't possessed before. "I did," he sent, "at great cost." Ward's response came back almost instantly, and it contained a universe of meaning. That is how humans learn to. Veilcor stared at the star charts for a long time after that. He finally understood. He understood why humanity had become a myth, a ghost story told to frighten young captains. Myths grow when the truth is willfully ignored. Humanity wasn't a monster hiding in the dark. It was a lesson the galaxy had refused to learn. In the Central Galactic Archives, the official entry for Sol was updated. Its status was changed to protected. The species was listed as human active, and under the threat level designation, a new entry was made, unnecessary if respected. Every military academy across the galaxy added new, mandatory lessons to their curriculum. They weren't about studying human weapons or ship designs. They were about studying human behavior. They taught cadets that quiet species were no longer to be mocked as weak, that silent, closed borders were no longer to be crossed as a challenge. The galaxy changed its rules, and because it did, it survived. Years later, a young alien cadet stood in the Grand Council chamber, staring at the seat once left empty for the lost civilization of Sol. It was occupied now. A human diplomat sat there, observing the proceedings with a calm, patient demeanor. The cadet leaned over and whispered to her mentor, "They don't look dangerous." The old mentor smiled faintly and replied softly, "That's how you know they are." Far away, on Earth, the night sky looked peaceful, just as it always had. In the bustling cities, people lived their normal lives. Children went to school and learned the true history of their species, a history that had once been hidden even from them. And out in the darkness of space, the old defense systems remained active, ever vigilant, but quiet. Humanity did not seek to inspire fear. They sought balance. They would trade with you. They would talk with you. They would even forgive you. But they would never again allow themselves to be erased. The galaxy would forever remember that day. The day an arrogant admiral called humans a myth. The day he started a war. And the generations it took for the final, chilling truth to settle into the collective consciousness of a million worlds. Humanity was never gone. It was just waiting. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the cosmos, please like, subscribe, and follow for more stories from beyond the stars.